Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to a brand new Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan and Oene, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this September 21st, 2021. Tonight, we are talking about Indigo Children. Fascinating topic, something that you might have heard about, but might not know a great deal about. Tonight, we're going to break it down. And I have a fantastic guest to help us do that. A good personal friend of mine of many years, Mikal Van Oene. And she is going to give you firsthand experiences and insights into this phenomenon. Don't go away. Well, hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having a fantastic evening out there. I know I've been having a wonderful time. I've been out on vacation. So, anytime I go away, that puts me in a much better mood to be able to do the work. I tend to get into bad moods. It's like Cancerian thing. So this is a nice way to kind of unwind and get myself back on track so that I can better service all of you. And I do that by this show, making it interesting and giving you fascinating topics that nobody else wants to talk about. That's the great thing about Vestiges After Dark is we talk about the things that no one else talks about. And even when people do talk about these topics, they don't necessarily do a very good job with them. I hope that I give you a little bit more of an intellectual insight into them, something that takes it to maybe not fully an academic level, but hopefully hits pretty close. I mean, that would be the goal here, is to give some substance to this conversation about metaphysics, esotericism, and that's what we're here to do. Now, I hope that those of you who are joining us for have been joining us for the last several seasons are enjoying season 4 so far. We've upgraded all the equipment, and I want to give a shout out to some good friends over at the Revolving Sushi Factory out there in Kennesaw off of Barrett Parkway. Fantastic Japanese restaurant. It's my new favorite place. Really, it's the only place I go for Japanese food now because I love it. And a couple of the servers there, a father and his son, noticed me on Ghost Adventures. They saw me coming in all the time, and they knew I was a regular. I'd go there a couple times a week. And he had a picture of me on, I think it was Exorcism in Erie, the first one, and he showed it to my wife and said, "Doesn't this look a lot like him?" And of course, we had to explain that, yeah, that actually is me. And he got all excited because he's a huge fan of Ghost Adventures. But that got him into some of the work that I do outside of the show. And one of them is this podcast, Vestiges After Dark. And I said, if you really like my work on Ghost Adventures, you might like some of the other things that I do. Why don't you check out the podcast? You might find it interesting. So he saw it and he's like, I've got all this equipment that I'm not using. I was going to do a podcast once and I just never get around to it. And it's all just sitting there, brand new equipment. And he says, why don't you use it? And so he brought it in. And so next time I went in to get some sushi, he had a big bag of audio equipment for me. And that's what inspired me to upgrade the show, because now I'm like, well, if I'm going to go get if I'm going to make this work, if I'm going to figure out all this new equipment, let's bring it to the next level. So this microphone I'm using is thanks to him. So if you like the new format, if you're enjoying the better quality sound that we're that we're producing this season, you can thank our friends over at the Revolving Sushi Factory for making that possible. Thanks so much. Hopefully he's watching tonight. Thanks so much. Now, there has not been a whole lot of questions coming in this week, probably because I was away and I wasn't paying as close attention as I usually do to social media. I try to believe, contrary to popular belief, I actually do break away from social media. I spend a lot of time on there for your benefit, not for mine, because there's absolutely very little benefit to me to be on social media. But there are, I try to go in and check in and see what's going on. And somebody had asked me what my take was on a video that he showed me from YouTube that he posted on Twitter. This is actually Christian the Wanderer on Twitter sent me this. And I did respond, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail. And basically it's a video of two guys. He's got a cell phone. And you know how when you have the QR code on your phone, you can like put it on the camera and you have the camera aim at a QR code. And what it will do is it will bring up the website to that QR code just by using your camera, aiming your camera at it. Well, he aims it at his friend's injection site, COVID-19 injection, vaccination, and it brings up some number or something like that. So he wanted to know what my take was on this. And I said, I'm going to quote myself directly. I said, with all of the bullshit being spewed from both sides of the political spectrum, I'm not sure I have a take anymore. From QAnons to Fauci worshippers, there is nothing but false data, fabricated statistics, misdirection, and manipulation, all for the glory of ideological control. Now, that's how I answered them on Twitter, sort of the Reader Digest version of my thoughts on this. My real, full, complete thought on this is that don't buy into any of this kind of bullshit. Okay. This is just as bad. If, people that are pushing that kind of video are the ones that are very anti-mask and anti-vaccine, and honestly, if you're upset like I am about the misinformation about masks and vaccines, the lack of information, the cutting corners, and the government making us out to be like, we're okay with it, trust us. We know what we're doing. You're an idiot, so you don't know what you're doing. You just need to listen to us. When you push a video that is the opposite of that, let's create some bullshit about how the vaccine has computer chips in it and the cell phones can pick up on it because it's some kind of tracking device. That's just as bad as the misinformation about masks and vaccines. And I really kind of get upset about the whole notion of anti-vaxxing or anti-vaxxer because, speak for yourselves, but I'm up to date on all my vaccines. I have reservations about the COVID-19 vaccine because I don't like the process that it went through. Didn't go through all these other ones that I did take. Just name them, all the ones that you take when you go to school. It's a different thing altogether. And there's a lot of misinformation on both sides of the political spectrum. So asking questions doesn't make somebody an anti-vaxxer. Being apprehensive and wanting more data does not make one an anti-vaxxer. My son is up to date on his vaccines as well, as is my wife. We are not an anti-vaccination family. But there's concerns that we have about this particular one and the process that it's gone through. And that does not make one an anti-vaxxer. But likewise, don't make up bullshit to push your side of the agenda by, creating a YouTube video that says, hey, look, picking up a QR code through the skin on this, data chip that's inside the vaccine site, and the people with the magnets and all that stuff. This is ridiculous. And it offends me because I remember back in the day, when I was an undergraduate student. I remember when some of these new viruses came around back then. We had SARS, we had you had the bird flu, the swine flu, you had all these other flus that were taken seriously, nowhere near to the effect that we're seeing with COVID-19, but they were serious illnesses. And what you would see is people in Asia wearing their masks. And this was back in the late 90s. Okay. When you'd see these flu outbreaks and whatnot, and they would always show Asia, and then they would show everybody walking around with masks on. Now, I've always been absolutely in love with Asian culture. I love Chinese culture. I can't stand their government, but I love their culture. The Chinese culture is the most beautiful thing to me. From the cuisine to the art to the music, the traditional music, that is. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I've always been in love with it. It's always been a major fascination of mine, going way, way back to childhood. But, outside of that, always been foremost, foremost in my mind, in Japanese culture too, but mostly Chinese. And when I saw Asian people walking around with masks on to allegedly protect themselves from these viruses back in the 90s, I thought, I wonder if that actually works. I've never been a germaphobe, but I didn't always take as good care of my immune system as I do now. Now I know how to take care of my immune system, and I also run, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 miles a day when I have the opportunity to do so. So, I try to keep myself a little bit healthier, a little stronger than I used to when I was a college student, when I slept all the time and I ate whatever I wanted, and I never took vitamins, and I was sick all the time. So I thought, my God, if all I had to do is put a mask on, maybe I could get past that suffocation feeling, and if it kept me from getting sick, this might be a good thing. So I actually did a whole research project on it back in the 90s, and guess what I found? It's pure bullshit. It's a pure bullshit. All right. Every single science journal that researched this back in the 90s all came to the same conclusion, that it was superstition. It was basically an Asian superstition. And a lot of it was to filter out allergens, which masks do help with that, and pollution. And masks can help with that because these are larger particles, you see. But to protect against the virus, not going to happen. And so I've known this all this time, because I remember doing this research project back in undergrad school and talking to my professors about it. We all got a good laugh about it. Everyone laughed. The politicians back then used to laugh about this. And so when COVID-19 hit, and I was at my favorite Chinese restaurant, and the owner there is from China, and she was talking about, how we're going to be dealing with this COVID-19. This is before all of the lockdowns and everything else. And I said, well, you're never going to get Americans to wear masks, because they're just never going to do that. And how wrong was I on that? Because as soon as the politicians started pushing this, they all jumped on it. And of course, because I still had all my research, and I could still access a lot of these journal articles, and there were even current ones that were far more current than the ones that I studied back in the 1990s, all saying the same thing all the way up until 2019. So you can't say, well, we know more now. No, we didn't. No, we don't. These articles were all there, still there. New England Journal of Medicine, back in, I think it was 2018 or 2019, called masks a talisman, to basically that they don't really work, but that they make people feel more comfortable. And so therefore they use them. And also it's used in surgical rooms, so that if a surgeon is like looking over the open area that, the incision point, he doesn't accidentally drool or spit or something into the wound by looking down. And, if his mouth's open and he's really concentrating, some, spittle or something might come out and fall into that's to prevent that from happening. It's definitely not to protect against viruses. And now in 2021, just a few months after all of this, you can't find these articles anymore. They've all been removed. How convenient is that? So when you push, when people that are anti-mask, anti-vaccine, pushing this with also erroneous information to push an agenda, that's just as bad. That's all, in some ways, that's almost worse, because you're actively fabricating something to push your point of view. I don't condone that. I only concern myself with fact. I don't care about ideology. I don't care about biases. I don't care about your paradigm. I don't care about feeling comfortable. What I care about is the actual truth. And I am very disturbed by what I see today, because there doesn't seem to be any interest or motivation in that. Well, it doesn't matter if you're one of the conservatives or one of the liberals. And if you think this is not a political thing, it is a political thing. Okay. And don't forget, where your vaccines came from. It wasn't Joe Biden that gave them to you. You can thank Donald Trump for pushing the FDA to do the emergency procedures that made it possible to get this out really quickly. So if you don't think enough time went into it, and I agree, I don't think enough time went into researching this. We don't know the long-term effects. Don't blame Joe Biden. Blame Donald Trump. Now, Joe Biden's complicit because he hasn't done anything to stop that. Now he's taking credit for it. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit, okay? So that's my full thought on this Twitter question this week. So, I always like to start us off with something, controversial sometimes. So, at least interesting. But that's the kind of stuff that bothers me. I don't like when people create bullshit. I don't like bullshit. If you don't know me by now, you know that I'm a no bullshit kind of person. So hopefully, you see that in me. And, even though we talk about topics that a lot of people think are bullshit, we try to handle them in a way that is not so offensive. But it is what it is. And I try to, keep it real. We want to keep it real around here. So there you go. My thoughts for this week. We have Sister Mary Joan with us today. How are you doing tonight, sister?
Good evening, Bishop. Good evening, everyone. Like starting the show off with a bang.
Oh yeah. We got
truth bomb.
Yeah. Well, we
smack everybody upside the head.
Got to keep it real, right?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's just that kind of stuff bothers me. So I'm seeing a lot, a lot of it comes from the QAnon stuff, and they're batshit crazy. This idea.
It's the manipulation that bothers me.
Yeah.
It's just the constant manipulation, and I'm getting tired of hearing people in either one camp or the other, and I'm like, you do realize you've been psychologically manipulated, right?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Okay, well, this conversation's over.
You can't even have the conversation,
No.
So it's like, I'd like to think that my audience, our audience here on this show is operating at a higher level. I like to believe that.
Make an informed decision with you and your doctor, and it's no one else's business. That's all I got to say about it.
That's the bottom line, So again, I agree completely with what you just said. Politics has no business in this. This is a decision that should be between a patient and their doctor, and end of story. And it shouldn't go any further than that. The conversation shouldn't extend outside of that. So yeah, I'm against vaccine mandates. I'm against vaccine passports. I'm against coercion. I'm against workplace coercion. And I won't tolerate that. But I do think there are valid reasons for people medically to get the vaccine. I think there's valid reasons medically to not get the vaccine, and that's between that patient, that doctor, and no one else. Stay the fuck out of other people's business, particularly when it comes to medical stuff. That's my final word on that. Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so, and the manipulation has to end. So I don't want to see any more of these videos of, the bullshit with the magnets and the microchips under the skin. Let's cut the shit on this. Okay. The fact of the matter is this is a vaccine that hopefully has some potential benefit. We don't know the long-term effects. I think there's definite reason to take a pause, take a step back, do some more research before we jump into this at the level that this political environment has done so. But I have never been against vaccines. I've always felt that, anytime you can do some medical good, by all means, do some medical good. But let's do it the proper way. Let's not just jump the gun and push this agenda. And, let's not do it that way. I'm against that kind of thing. Same thing with masks, okay? The masks are the same damn thing. Anyway, that's not the subject of tonight's show. Tonight's show is actually about Indigo Children. And I don't know how many people know about Indigo Children. Do you know about Indigo Children, Sister Mary Joan?
I learned about it about 10, 15 years ago, because I actually had a pretty close friend of mine that thought she was. And doing the research that I did back then, I was like, oh, yeah, definitely. I know that they are children born that have a special connection to the divine, and they are usually a lot smarter than other kids, and they're misdiagnosed a lot as having ADHD or even autism. Very artistic, very articulate, very intelligent. Don't usually get along in school very well because they're not challenged enough. I know there's several different theories on it. Some people think that they didn't start coming onto the planet until the late 60s, but there are other theories that say that Indigo Girls.
The Indigo Girls. Sounds like a good music group there.
Yeah. Freudian slip. I was listening to them earlier.
Yeah.
So, so there's theories that they've been born all throughout time. And I know that they got their name Indigo Children from them having an indigo type aura. So that's about all I know about it. But I do know several people who I would categorize as Indigo Children.
Yes, and that's the fascinating thing. We're going to hopefully break this down and make it a little bit more pragmatic and a little more approachable of a subject, and not leave it to the mythos of the New Age movement, because that's pretty much where you're going to find this terminology.
Right.
I typed in Indigo Children on Google just to see what would come up. And of course, it's just all these New Age articles. But I did find one that sort of breaks it down, even though it is a New Agey one, sort of breaks it down in a way that hopefully makes it approachable. And I'd like to start us off with that. And then we can get into the meat with this by introducing the audience to our guest tonight, Mikal Van Oene. But before we start with that, let me just mention the first part of this article. So it's basically a breakdown of 13 traits and signs of Indigo Children, but it starts off with a description, and I like this. This is from Gaia.com. www.gaia.com. And so it asks, what is an indigo child? And it explains an indigo child or indigo kid is an upgraded blueprint of humanity. Well, that's a little bit of a presumptuous statement.
Put it, yeah.
It's presumptuous, but we can maybe work with it. A term that came up when addressing the aura colors of these very different kids. Previously, auric fields were expected shades of the rainbow, but the indigo's field was dominated by a royal blue color, sort of what Sister Mary Joan just mentioned, thus establishing a change of course in human evolution and their indigo aura. Gifted children on a clear mission to challenge and shift reality, they first begin appearing in the 1970s, so fairly recent type of phenomena. Beyond psychic awareness, they are highly driven and creative with a perception that sees through the established norms of society. Old souls indeed, their mission is clearly laid out to shake up the modern world and pave the way for future generations to create greater peace and harmony for all. Both of these generations of children are well into their teens and adulthood, so don't allow the label to dissuade you from exploring the concept of indigo children. So this article sort of implies that it was a time period where this occurred, and maybe not so much happening anymore, which I can kind of agree with, because I would say that back in the late 80s to early 2000s, that's when I saw them the most.
For me, yeah, late 80s, early 90s as well.
Yeah. I haven't come across many anymore that I would say are that categorized by this. And I'll explain to you a little bit about how I came to these conclusions later. But we're going to go through these 13 common traits tonight and see if you know people that might fall into this category. But I can tell you, I know one in particular. I knew a lot, actually, in the years of my career in metaphysics and working in multitude of different capacities where I had access to a lot of interesting people and met a lot of interesting children. I've worked in grammar schools where, you'd be able to see different child personality types, and there'd always be those one or two that were different from the rest. And so for someone like me that is spiritually inclined and able to recognize this, it wasn't so hard and difficult. I could look at that and say, well, there's one. Now, also coming from the Buddhist worldview, as all of you should know by now, if you've listened to enough of these episodes of Vestiges, you know that, I wasn't always a bishop. I wasn't always a Christian. I was a Buddhist for a large part of my life, and Buddhism actually has an allowance for this. They don't call them Indigo Children. They call them tukals or tukalas. But it's the same basic principle, a little bit different with, woven into their theological worldview, but the same basic general principle. And this was the worldview that I was coming from. This is what I was practicing when I discovered our guest tonight. Or at least I discovered her indigo status, if we're going to call it that. I don't know if that's the correct term. But my guest tonight, our guest tonight, is Mikal Van Oene, and I've known her since she was a kid. She was a friend. I was a friend of a family member of hers, and so I was very close with this family member. And so when I would come and go on trips or something, we would stop in and see her family. And Mikal happened to be one of the times that I went. She was there at the house we visited from this family member. And then I immediately, as soon as I saw her, I could recognize that we were dealing with what this term is, this indigo child. And now she's an adult, but we're going to talk about what an indigo child is, but more importantly, what are the risk factors of this? Because if you listen to the New Age movement, you would assume that this is like this great thing. Oh, these spiritual awakening, these powerful kids with all this spiritual awareness and everything. But in reality, it's actually not as pleasant. And Mikal can share with you tonight some of her personal firsthand experiences with this, things that I tried to help her to cope with when she was young. We did some. I taught her some basic meditation. I taught her some basic praxis techniques. She's a student to this day in my webinar. And hopefully this has helped her to be able to hone this ability and to try to bring it in. But you really need a lot of guidance and you need a lot of foundation. And Mikal didn't always have that. So she likes to consider her life to be an open book. So tonight we're going to be talking a lot about her life and her experiences in this. So Mikal, welcome to Vestiges After Dark.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's good to see you, Mikal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for willing to share some of these thoughts that and experiences that have led you to where you are today and who you are today. And I mean, it's been quite a journey because I mean, I remember, I don't think you were raised in any particular religious worldview, right? No.
My mother was Ashkenazi Jew, Reformed Jew, and so we kind of loosely celebrated. We celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah, but I was never taught any sort of system or I didn't really know the reasons for any of the practices or anything like that.
Yeah, and you didn't go to any, like, did you ever go to like temple? I mean, you didn't go to like the synagogue or something like that, did you?
We did.
You did?
To temple.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
It was just for like bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvah stuff. So no, okay. It wasn't very irregular, but we did.
Okay. So then you had a little bit of not a formal foundation, but you had a little bit of something that I guess introduced you to more conventional religious practice. But I remember your family being also very artistic and musically inclined and spiritually kind of the same way, I guess, very, very open to a lot of these metaphysical, esoteric ideas. We had a lot of conversations in those days. But I mean, when I met you that first time, I mean, it was very startling to me because when I meet somebody that has a strong spiritual connection, I feel it. I mean, some people might call that a type of empathic ability or psychic ability. I don't really use those terms, although I wouldn't say they're inaccurate. It's just not terms that I necessarily feel are necessary. I just feel the connection. And I can feel their spirituality. It's kind of how I work today in the work that I do in exorcism. trying to diagnose and identify, one of the most common questions I get as an exorcist, as a bishop, is how do I know if a person's possessed? Because people want to know how to basically self-diagnose, or they want to diagnose a family member or some friend or something. And the fact of the matter is, it really kind of there's some formal things that you can do, and there's formal training that you can acquire in order to help you with that process. But really, it is something that is a discernment. It's a spiritual engagement. And this comes very natural to me, and it works in multiple capacities. It's not just for looking for a demonic attachment or some kind of negative thing. It's also for good things. And I immediately could sense a dramatic, strong, and unusually high capacity for spiritual connection in you. It exuded from you. And I mean, I don't look for auras. I can see auras if I meditate and try. But I mean, it's not like I'm going around, trying to detect auras and look at colors, and I don't really do that, nor do I need to do that. But I mean, with you, it was very different. So that was the first thing that caught my attention, because I thought, well, this is definitely not a typical child. So, what would you say before we start looking into, and what I want to kind of do today to make it kind of fun is I want to go through these 13 traits, and I want to see if you feel that all of them apply to you, or if there are some that don't. I'd like to know which one of those do not apply. So it's going to be like a little bit of a survey I'd like you to take with us on the air today, just to kind of see, and then we can kind of break down each of these categories and see how it applies to you. But before we get into that, I just like to know, when you met me for the first time, where were you at spiritually? Like, what kind of things were happening at that point in your life, if you can recall?
Well, I always felt so isolated from other children. And in fact, I usually got along very well with older children or adults at that point. But at the same time, I don't know if you know this about me, but I think I've told you, but when I was really young, before I met you, in elementary school.
You were what? 11 when I met you?
11.
11, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I was still young, but younger than that even. I talked to things, inanimate things. I heard things. I had a very vivid imagination. In fact, I think that vivid imagination is connected. I think you need to have an imagination to connect spiritually, or at least some sort of imagination, some sort of visual capacity for visualization. But
yeah.
I was talking to rocks and my shadow, and I talked to plants. I talked to animals. There was a time where my dad caught a garter snake, and I'd kiss animals on their lips, and he caught a garter snake, and he showed it to me, and I saw I was a little baby, and I grabbed it and I went to kiss it, and it kissed me back on the nose. So I'd kiss fish, butterflies would land on me. So my parents noticed this connection I had to the natural world, especially animals seemed to be calmer around me. It seemed to sort of, I always felt like I had a very deep understanding of the natural world and animals and plants, and even inanimate things like rocks, or insects, or like things like insects that normally people shy away from. But
you almost sound like a fae, Bishop.
I know, right?
Yeah. Little fae folk.
Yeah, definitely.
I would have these dreams. I had this feeling like I always wanted to be an elf. And I'd wake up, I'd say, I feel like I'm an elf, and I wish I was an elf. And I'd always wake up and I'd look in the mirror every morning. It was like a period of like a month when I was really young, and I'd look to see if my ears were pointing. It never happened. But I wish so badly. I wanted to run away to the woods, and that's where I felt at home. So my parents encouraged that, luckily. And my dad would take us on walks and take us to zoos, and I learned a lot about animals, and that's where my passion for them kind of grew, and wanted to be a vet. Yeah. So anyway, by the time I was 11 meeting you, I grew up in a very small town, So that feeling of isolation was a little bit easier. And I felt like the kids in the small town had a bit more empathy, or a bit more of an understanding. And we sort of were a big family because we graduate each grade. We'd graduate together. We weren't meeting a whole bunch of new kids. So we got to know each other pretty well. So I had made friendships, and even at that time, like the teachers were, as I just remember, another thing, I just always wanted to draw. I always wanted to draw. So I would draw, I would get my work done so quickly, and I would draw just because I wanted to draw. I didn't want to do the work. So I'd get it done. And the teachers would just keep giving me more work and more work, more paperwork. I was around maybe around 7 at this point. And so they said to I just wanted to draw. And they said to my mom, like, she's gifted, she needs to skip a class. And I guess my mom felt like I wasn't really emotionally mature, or as mature. And so she got worried about that, because I did cry. I cried a lot. I always cried a lot because I couldn't express myself very well.
Yeah.
But it's like these teachers, they're going on about how gifted I am, and I just wanted to draw. I didn't want to do the work. So I always had these. Yeah, I've experienced things very differently, and I really tried to connect with people, but I've found it hard my whole life. So by the time I met you, I was kind of coming in pre-puberty, kind of coming in, discovering myself a bit more, knowing how to express things a little better, but still not able to fully, or as well as I can now. And so I kind of started to feel a little lost. My parents were fighting at that time. They were arguing.
Yeah.
That was like a year before they divorced. So, and I remember you warned them to have some sort of stability for me. I never had stability. I did not have stability, but I always felt this very deep connection with the natural world, and even beyond the natural world, just looking up into the sky, and just this longing that I could never express. And so that's kind of where I was when I met you, was that I've had these feelings, but I didn't have the words to express them. And that's kind of what you've helped me with my whole life, basically, is these concepts that I've always felt and understood, but just putting the words to them and having the vocabulary so I can express them to other people instead of having them inside of me and not understanding what they are.
Do you feel that the work that I have shared with you over the years, and you were in many ways one of the first students to learn this stuff, because we know we got the webinar that's been going on for about 4 years now. But I've been teaching this stuff to you since you were 11. And do you feel that learning about the archetypes, particularly through the lens of the tarot, which was the model that I felt was perhaps the most accessible, particularly for a young kid, and people might be, the tarot, it's so dangerous, it's a cult, and it's satanic and all this stuff. It's like, well, no, not at all. But, did you find that understanding the Jungian archetypes through the lens of the tarot, did that help to give you the alphabet and the language that you needed to better communicate these thoughts and ideas? Because you are such an artistic person. You are always such a dramatically intelligent child. And, intelligent children don't typically express themselves well, because they usually are operating at a level that's beyond some of their development. And because the rest of them hasn't caught up with their intellectual capacity, some parts of the brain are just, at that 11-year-old level. And yet, spiritually, you're hundreds of years ahead of yourself. So did you find that understanding the archetypes was sort of a way to better communicate and learn to use art as a means to facilitate this?
Yeah, I would stare at those cards that you bought me hours and hours. I'd just sit there and stare at them. But there was that big gap. It's like it was incomplete work. So there was that gap where we weren't in contact, and that's kind of when I went to college, and so that's sort of when my the obstacles I have with my mental health started to show themselves, and I didn't understand. So I think if it wasn't for that little bit that you taught me back then, I don't think I would have been here. And truly. And sorry if I'm going to get emotional because these
that's okay.
very personal subjects,
yeah,
but
of course,
I'm happy to talk about them. So, so then when I contacted you again and we reconnected, that's when we really started doing more of that work. And I was in a place, I was institutionalized several times. I felt helpless, and didn't feel like I belonged here. And so learning that, like, that really helped me. Like, I stopped becoming a victim. I stopped feeling like a victim, and I started feeling like I could take back my power.
Yeah.
And take back what was taken from me. And that was a pretty amazing thing. And even to this day, I mean, I've improved in the past 4 or 5 years we've had the class. I've improved more than I have the 10 years I've had going to therapy. So
yeah.
So but that and therapy together, and it's really done really well for me. And I hope to help people with that who have the same obstacles that they have to go through. I really hope to use my experience to help people. That's why I jumped on the chance to come on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate that, honestly. And I think, Sister Mary, Joan, and I are currently working on some projects for the future that might open up opportunities for you to be able to even further expand upon that inclination, because I have always felt that you had a role to play in this. And for the audience benefit, we didn't get this far into her life story, and it's pretty difficult to do in one show. But I had the pleasure a few years back of baptizing you. So it's a wonderful thing that you grew up in this loosely Jewish home. And then, kind of navigated through these new age waters and all of these other, spiritual things that, you explored.
Yeah, at one point in college, for a brief moment, I identified as an atheist, and it just didn't feel right.
Well, we all have to be atheists at least for one time.
Yeah. One thing I liked that you said, Michael, was that you decided you weren't going to be a victim anymore, and you're going to take back your power. And that's what everybody that's going through these kind of things needs to remember. You're not a victim. You're being challenged, and you've got to grab that challenge by the throat and conquer it. Yes. And I think you would be a wonderful addition to help kids that are coming up and going through this, because let's face it, therapists and doctors, psychologists, they do not understand what you're going through. They want to put you in a little box and diagnose you with something.
And they want to medicate the hell out of you.
And they want to medicate you and just, make you functional in society, but they don't want to get to the root of the problem. So I'm very proud of you for doing that.
Thank you very much. And I would love to help those in need.
I think you're going to get your chance. I think you're going to get your chance.
I know, that's why I'm so excited. Yeah. And only ever, of all the therapists and counselors I've been through, only one ever kind of sort of was in the ballpark. He said, listen, this isn't a scientific term. This isn't a diagnosis. He said, but I really believe you're it's called an HSP, a highly sensitive person. Mm-hmm. And so he sort of started talking to me. He's like, I'm researching this, and I think it has a connection. He even mentioned Indigo Children. It's like it's all people who are, that's why it's mistaken for autism, because the data, I get overwhelmed by data a lot and strings of data, but unlike autism, I can categorize them really well, and with people, I can look at somebody and know exactly how they're feeling, and or I can hear their voice and say there's something. I can really pick that out, and so he thought that. So he said, you look into HSP, a highly sensitive person. So I did, and it was really interesting.
Well, let's go through the list and see which ones of these resonate with you and which ones do not, assuming there are any that I have a feeling probably all of them are, or at least almost all of them. But let's look at each one and break it down and talk about it. So number one, out of the 13 common traits of Indigo Children listed on the Gaia.com website, is you feel spiritually awakened. So, I mean, I don't think we even need to really talk about that any further, right?
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Especially, I mean, when you're a kid and you're getting visions and things are like these things are trying to communicate with you and you don't even have the words to explain them. That was fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, spiritual awakening, I mean, that was the first thing that I noticed in you. So, I mean, that was sort of a no-brainer there. Number two is you are destined to be here. And let me explain what they mean by it, and then we can see where it fits into what we're talking about. It says you are confident and even arrogant at times and emboldened by something larger than you can name. You know that you were put on this planet for a reason, and that reason is to enact positive change. You know that those who are native to this planet are growing and ascending and need help in their transformation. So I think based upon some of the things that you just talked about, this innate need to help people, I think is sort of you responding to that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I've always felt that. And I've always told people, I'm going to change the world. I don't know how, but I'm going to change the world. And I always felt like there is not enough compassion.
No, there isn't.
Right now. And I had to learn the difference between, love and compassion, and I really have been doing very well with that, because with love there's attachments, and sometimes you want to help somebody, but the best way to help them is just to let go, just distance. Yeah. And even though it hurts me every time, but I'm getting better at it. And some people they just don't want to be helped. Some people, they don't want to change, they can't change, they don't have the capacity. They don't want to be helped. So that sense of purpose is one of the big ones that's given me a lot of hurt over the years, is coming to understand that. And there are people with a nefarious intent, and it took me a very long. I'm still learning that every day. I still trust everybody. And
unfortunately, people with nefarious intent are going to seek out people like you.
Yes, and
so you really have to have your shields up.
That's a big theme. That's a big theme that we could go into. But yes, that's happened quite a bit.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the things that I tried to emphasize the most to your parents when you were young, is that when you were talking about how you needed stability, but you also needed foundation and constant regular spiritual guidance. Because I knew, coming from a very similar place as you, the only difference being is that I did have a lot of stability, which helped. And, you know, that of course is always going to be the luck of the draw, right? I mean, I don't believe that those things are written into stone. I think it's just some of us get lucky, some of us don't. But the work is still there. So the universe doesn't really care if it puts you into a bad position to get this done or a wonderful position to get this done. It just expects you to get it done either way.
Yep. Sometimes I think being born like rich and given a lot of material things, I think that sometimes they need to work even harder to get out of that paradigm.
That's true, because that can be its own detriment. It's its own attachment. And certainly, you know, people that come from that lifestyle are going to usually have family members and role models that emphasize that same type of drive towards power and money. And that's going to lead them further away from the kind of core spirituality of authenticity that is necessary to develop as somebody of your particular caliber. So I think that is part of the destiny aspect, although I hesitate to use the word destiny too much. But because let's face it, from a Christian point of view, we're all destined to be here. You could say that God put us here because he wants us here. So that's the only reason that's needed. But again, from the more new agey slant, you know, if they're seeing it as some kind of like purpose, then you could say that you put exactly where you need to be in order to effectuate the type of spiritual development that is necessary for not just yourself, but those that you come into contact with. So yeah, I see number 2 there. So number 3 is you have high expectations of yourself and others. I think that's very true.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I am such a perfectionist to the point where I've been diagnosed with OCD, clinically diagnosed, but I am such a perfectionist because I feel like in my head, it's like I feel like I can't get my stupid body, my stupid meat brain to do these things I see.
Meat sack's not cooperating.
Yeah, and it takes time, and it feels like the time is like this thing, this like it dilates and it contracts, and to me, and I've always been real sensitive to that. But so it's like, oh, it takes this much time. People are saying it's gonna take me 5 years to become a master at something. Okay. But it feels like I just have it there, and I gotta train my stupid meat to do what I'm feeling inside. And that's like, I have huge expectations, to the point where I'm disappointing myself a lot. And that's something I've also had to work on. And other people too. It's like people who I come to care about, people who I get to know, even just acquaintances. If I see that they're capable of something and they don't, it's like I know that you have the capacity for this thing, but you did this thing here, which shows that you weren't mindful, you weren't thinking. Or it's like, come on, I know you're smarter than that. Or this was such a silly thing to do. Why did you do this? I think I have really high expectations for people I care about. Just if I see that they're not doing their best. And I think that sometimes, at least I used to come across as being really frustrated at them, but it was all from a place of love, like or compassion, like pushing them. Like I'm trying to make you see that just be in the moment, and the thing that you did wouldn't have happened. And I mean, we're all guilty of that.
Well, our corporeality takes over. The problem is that when you're operating spiritually, and particularly if you get good at it, I mean, most people are not good at their spiritual awareness. So it's not usually an inhibitor to them. They've become very comfortable with their corporeal reality, and they're content with that. But for those of us who have worked very hard at expanding our spiritual awareness, you very quickly come to realize just how limiting the corporeal aspects of our nature are. And yes, they become very frustrating, and you get very frustrated in those things in others when you see that they also have great potential, and you see that potential, and yet it's very difficult to bring them up to where they need to be, or where they should be, or where you think they should be. And
that's I've learned communication is how you word things is so important. Because I was so impulsive. I just come out and say, this was a dumb thing you did. But then I'd have to think, why did that make me angry? And this comes from therapy as well as what you've taught me. But this was mostly cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, why am I angry? Where is this coming from? Yeah. Is it from a trauma I had, or am I just really wanting them to do better because I care about them? So then I identify, okay, this comes from a place of caring. So how can I say that? And it's individual, it's person to person. How can I say that in a way that this person will respond to positively? Like, I know this and this about them. I know what their motivations are. I know what their passions are and their goals. And how can I kind of just bring them back into focus, like bring the perspective back into focus, put them in the moment again, like get them out of whatever cloud there, and just bring them back and say, like, this is how it could have been done better, and I care about you, therefore that's why I'm bringing this up. It's not because I think you're incapable. I think you're more than capable, actually. Right. So yeah. Number 4 is you have a strong intuition. So I mean, we know that's true already. Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt, but no, go ahead. The only thing where I think I'm lacking, I'm lacking in a lot of areas. I'm always working on things. And I think one area I'm really lacking in is kind of, I override my intuition of people, strangers, because I want to believe, and And I forget people don't have good intentions. And I forget,
yeah,
because everything I do comes from like this really big feeling in my heart and in my soul. And everything I do is like with open arms and people aren't like that.
No, they're not.
It is hard. My friend who's an Indigo child, she was very trusting of everyone, and me being a Metro Atlanta cop for 20 something years, I was just like, girl, you cannot be trusting people. We'd be walking downtown Atlanta, and someone would come out of nowhere and walk up to us, whether it be a homeless person or whatever, and they'd be kind of aggressive, and I'd step between them, and she's like, oh, well, I've got some money. I'm like, no, do not. And just, you want to believe the good in people because you're a good person and you see the good in people, but you got to understand that there's the negative side too.
Yes. And actually I was, the person I'm with right now is wonderful and truly, truly wonderful. And he's a very good judge of character. So he's like, don't ever change because I love this in you. But he's like, I'm gonna let you know when I notice someone in something. I'm gonna show you, like, this is why I'm noticing this in this person. This is his behaviors, and he's like, and then I'm gonna, I'll tell you if I think it's. He's like, but don't ever lose that trusting nature, because that he really respects that. So, well,
it's rare to see these days when it's genuine. Yeah.
Yes, and that's helped me feel a lot safer. And for a while, I was homeless because it's a long story, but I had a job, but housing was really hard to find here because a lot of people during COVID saw that Vermont, it was a small place, and I live in a very small town, and they'd come up and they think it was safe, and that brought COVID in. But for a while, people were just renting places, and I could not find a damn place, so it took me months. So in the meantime, I had to stay at a motel. And in that time, I lost a lot of empathy and a lot of sympathy for people who are bums or there are a lot of people who are homeless that need help, but these people, there's a certain type of person. They were offered drug rehab. They were offered to pay their first and last month, 3 months of rent. They paid for their furniture. They were offered programs. They were offered food. They were offered all of these things. And I took advantage of every single one of those, and a few other people did. But then most of those people I just completely lost. And it's like I feel guilty about it, but at the same time, they just didn't want help. They didn't want help, and they were out to get everyone else but other than themselves. And that's how they were. And they were horrible. And they would yell at each other, and they'd push each other into walls, and they'd fight over resources that they were enough for everybody. It's like, I just didn't understand it. So I really got a big dose of reality in that time. With certain groups of people.
I mean, there's major challenges, I think, to understanding the dynamic of how the social problems that we understand and we try to resolve, particularly some corporal works of mercy within the church, which are fundamental to helping people, but also the psychology of it's very different. And to just approach these problems from a place of compassion actually puts them at a great disadvantage, because a lot of them are not operating from a sincere place. And I think you get to know that. I think you get to experience that directly. And that's unfortunate, but it's kind of the way it is. And
as much as I wanted to talk to them and know what were they thinking, what was going on in their heads, where did they come from, what was their life like, that's one of those instances where I figured out compassion is just staying the hell away from them and surviving.
I'm glad you did.
Right now.
So that's one of those where you step up. I'll pray for you, bro, but you stay over there.
Yeah, that's all you can do. Well, we are talking with Mikal Van Oene, Indigo Child, about Indigo Children. And we've got more show for you, maybe 2 more segments. You might stick around for 3 hours. So we'll be back in just a moment with more signs of Indigo Children. Don't go away.
With you. know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread, well, I built a resistance with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you on the ground. You were gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you for days. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Not in the fast lane, I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to mend your wounds from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other, admit our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you. I'm better with you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We are talking about Indigo Children with my good friend, Mikal Van Oene. And we also are going to be taking your questions from the chat room, or you can call into the show at 347-338-1860. That's 347-338-1860. Enter PIN number 1100999 to get into the switchboard. And we'll take you on the air. There's also Skype at Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER. If you're international, that's a way to call for free. We hope to hear from you. We hope to hear your questions at the very least, and we'll do our best to answer them. Don't go away. There's so much more to talk about. Well, Mikal, going forward with our little survey here to see, we've got, I think we left off at number 5. Number 5 is you question authority. How do you feel about that one?
Yes. Well, it's yes and no. So growing up, I trusted authority. And I trusted teachers, and I trusted my parents, and I trusted that the laws were for the best of everyone, and that people and all of the people that everyone tells you is in charge is the best. They have the best of intentions. Going back to that, and I trusted that. And then as I grew older, and around the time we met, and especially after puberty and going into high school, I completely saw that was absolutely not the case. And I have a lot to say about systems of power. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think so. I mean, if you're my student and you're not questioning power and systems of power, then there's something wrong with my teaching technique, and I better just retire. You know what I mean? I don't teach people to be anarchists, but I do teach people to be to hold liberty higher than any other value that a human being can integrate into their life. I personally, I don't feel that there is anything higher than liberty. I think it's the highest expression of spiritual realization, to be honest. And
I've always been that way too. I mean, in the moment I realized I have the same exact. I mean, I read your posts and same exact opinion.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad that that I'm not making it too uncomfortable for you when you read my Twitter, because I mean sometimes it's uncomfortable for me to read what I write. Great. Well, that's fantastic. Number 6 is this is kind of related to number 5. You want to overturn the man.
Stick it to him.
Yeah, stick it to the man.
Oh man, that's a funny one. I always feel like to take something apart, you have to become a part of it. So I feel like if I really wanted to put the time and energy into it, which I don't, but if I did, I could probably become like a suit or something, or like a someone working for the government, just go in and slowly take it apart.
That wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, certainly.
Yeah, I know.
I always say the best politician is a politician that does absolutely nothing for you.
Yeah. Movie plot.
It's very true.
I mean, yeah. The problem is I've only got one life as me, and then I got to learn it all over again.
Well, it depends on how much cohesion you build
That's
up.
true.
So I mean, keep it together, and who knows what might happen.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I had to choose what I wanted to dedicate this life to, and it was art. It was creating art. So.
And see, for me, it was religion, which is kind of a type of art, I guess you could say. So I mean, it is what it is. Politics. People are always like, "You should be president." It's like, no, I think that
Oh dear God.
I'll tell you, I'd assassinate myself before I'd ever successfully be able to pull that off. I mean,
I would become a dictator. You would not like what I have. What my laws will be like.
Number 7. This one's again another no-brainer. You are creative. I think you know this. Musically and artistically gifted. The Indigo Children are. So I think we already know that is true for you.
Yes.
Number 8.
I've got. Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah, you've got art. You've got art to show us.
Instruments. Wait.
Yeah, definitely. Why don't you put a few pieces up that you were showing us earlier before we went live, just so people can see some of the things that you have seen. Now, these are visions, right? These are spiritual encounters you've had.
Yes. So I'll just pick a few because I don't want to take up too much time. But what I'm working on, I was really introspective today because I was preparing for this. But this is sort of, this was an old drawing, but I've been working on this during break.
That's awesome.
This is sort of like an abridged version of, I have the elements here, earth, and then the sun, and then that's sort of like the divine knowledge. And then I have water, earth, fire, air, and then that's kind of like the spirit right there.
Yeah.
And then sort of goes up. I kind of want to make it like the tree of life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a divine mother and the divine father and all of everything. And then this is like the sun, and then it's like the son of God, and then fractals sort of things just break apart as they go down. So yeah, that's sort of what I was working on.
I like that one.
So I have 2 examples. I do a lot of portraits. I haven't been lately, but I used to do a lot of portraits for people. So I have 2 that when I look at a picture of somebody, and they say you can't know someone online or like over long distances, but I definitely can.
It depends on how insightful you are.
Yeah, I mean, I still get that same that feeling like that. Like you were saying, there's a certain feeling, certain people, but I think there's also I've noticed that there's a pattern. There's like a corporeal pattern, like people with certain face shapes and eye shapes and like different body types, and I feel like that corresponds to different archetypal.
It does. There's a mold. I mean, honestly,
makes sense,
those 16 court cards in the tarot absolutely are the parent molds upon which humanity is built. So ultimately, there are 16 people with a lot of appendages, but there's only 16 people in the world. That's what people don't get.
Right, I know. Well, I'm very visual, so I pick up. I kind of knew that before I knew that. I had that feeling before.
Yeah.
I would look at people's palms, even though palm reading's kind of iffy, but I would look at the shapes of people's hands.
Yeah.
I feel like correspond with like earth people I have very small but like square, like kind of like square hands. And you can tell an earth person because they've always got dirt under their fingernails, or they've got like calluses and stuff. But anyway, so I look at people and I kind of just I draw those things out. Like this girl, she was smiling in her photo. These aren't people I know. These are people I just. There's a forum where people put their pictures of themselves and you draw. It's just like practice.
Yeah. So
this girl, she's smiling, and she had really kind eyes, but she was kind of like just kind of breaking. I felt like there was a lot of cracks. It's almost like crazing in pottery. Like it's cracking that, but she's still functional.
She's got an internal struggle going on.
Yeah, she's got a lot of scars she's healing from. And then this person, they were holding their cat. And
I really like this one.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I just automatically saw that she had a very special connection with her cat. I just could see it based on the cat's expression and her expression. And so I tried to really draw their connection together. So, yeah. And then I do monsters. I'll see.
I do a few monsters.
I have a very cartoony, like, I see things so in my mind's eye. Not, mind you, I can be objective and say, okay, they don't really look like this, but I see in my mind's eye people look like cartoons to me, and they act like cartoons, and sometimes I'll laugh inappropriately because the situation is so absurd, and it's like nobody's getting how absurd it is.
Yeah.
And so I'll draw like these cartoony. I don't have anybody. Oh, here's an example of a comic that I do, but this was a really absurd situation that my friends and I were in. So I'll just draw. I kind of made. Oh, here's a good one. This is the melting pot of America. Kind of how I feel about it right now.
Yeah, and for those of you listening on Spreaker or any of the audio channels, you can see these by coming over to the Nicolayan TV channel on YouTube, or on my Twitter or Facebook for The Exorcist Bishop. You can see the video playbacks of these if you want to see the art that she's showing us right now. It's just it's very interesting. I mean, really, some of the things that
making my stick figures look pretty mundane. I'm gonna tell you.
Yeah, no, Michael's a very, very talented person.
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of her work.
Yeah,
this is like an air elemental. It's like an earth elemental, and this was, I forget this was kind of at the beginning of COVID, I think, or I kind of felt like everything was like fraying. It was like there was fraying everywhere. And
well, it's interesting. It looked like you even had a little bit of the spike protein thing going on over there on one side of it, little spikes coming out.
Yeah, see, that was right before. I didn't know.
That is interesting, yeah.
And
it's all archetypal.
Yeah, it's like I'm very earth heavy person, so I draw a lot of crystals and stuff. These are more elementals. They're not really. I mean, you could say this is fire, I guess. Or wait, let me see. Yeah. This guy kind of reminds me of Earth, I guess. It's like I don't really know what I'm drawing until I'm done.
Yeah, no, I mean that's well, I mean, I think that's really how it should be. I mean,
part of it, yeah.
It's not really about making it a left brain process. It's about opening oneself up to spiritual realization and the insights that unfold from that. And I think your art helps you to do that.
It does, and it is very meditative for me. When I'm not trying to draw anything in particular, and I'm just sitting there, these creatures come out of nowhere. And this is the one more, and then we can move on. But I showed this one to you a while ago, but this is a sort of, I guess, my feeling when I'm in a city, like a big city, or even just now. This orb, this is like a reoccurring theme, because I feel. I explain to people, like, I feel like there's this really big thing above me, and it's trying to stick a bunch of little tendrils into this little body, this little girl body, and it's like it's always trying to, and sometimes that stuff's too much in, or sometimes I can't, but I always feel like I'm attached to like a balloon, like a gigantic balloon, to all of just this.
Yeah.
So
no, I get it. I get it. And well, let's revisit that. I want to revisit that. Number 8, you are a change maker. I think that is definitely something that is part of your nature. I don't think you've fully been given the opportunity to realize this one yet. I think this one is one that's coming, but I think you definitely have the proclivity for it. What do you think?
Yeah. I see. I don't want to sound too arrogant sometimes, but
well, I think that just comes with the territory.
There's arrogant and then there's confident.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. So a good example, a recent example is I joined if you don't know what Discord is, it's like a themed kind of like the old chat rooms, but you got you can create these different servers and you have people come in and you all have similar interests and talk about the things you're interested in. And I joined an art collective server, and this is where I met the person I'm with right now. And it was instant. We were instantly drawn to each other. But also the server itself, they had a lot of they weren't very nice to each other. I mean, they were kind of cold towards each other, and they didn't really try to push for any sort of like camaraderie. It's just, they did collaboratives and stuff, or collaborations, but there wasn't really any like reaching for something deeper. And so I came on, and the first thing I did was like, I showed them I linked I said, hi, I'm Michael, and here's my art, and I linked all my social media. And then a lot of people, the well-meaning people on there, messaged me like, you shouldn't do that, don't do that. And then so it seems like after I joined, and I would just, after a while, it's like they were like weirded out by me, because it's like a lot of people think I have secondary motive or something, or like I have a hidden motive. But after a while, they all started to really open up to me, and I made really close friends, because a lot of them were also very artistic and talented and introspective people. And I mean, that's how the person I'm with fell in love with me, because he's like, immediately, you weren't like anybody else on there, and you could sense that. And I feel like I kind of opened people up. And I've had people like in workspaces tell me I'm the glue to the organization. It's like people don't realize. I kind of work behind the scenes, I guess, and
that's like a true Indigo child would. Yeah, I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
Sometimes the leadership is actually from taking a step back and working from the shadows, I think. Number 9, you are a lost soul. Feeling out of place with others as you recognize you are different than most people. You can tend towards being a loner or rebel, unwilling to compromise just to fit in. I think that describes you perfectly.
Yes, I can't pretend to be anyone other than myself, and it's gotten me in, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. Sometimes it gets me fired, but I can't do it. I start to get physically sick. Yeah. When I try to pretend to be anyone else, I get physically ill, and I've tried to, there's like this trend on social media too, where people are self-diagnosing themselves and saying that they're like, they feel like they're alone and nobody understands them. But I feel like that's become trendy now. So it's like I kind of have to be careful with it, because it's kind of lost its meaning. But I do feel like I don't fit in, but I embrace it, because you can have a lot of fun with that, I think, and you can change a lot of people's perspective for the better, or at least make someone's day a little bit better. And
Sure. Yeah.
So you don't have to feel like you fit in with these people, but with humanity, but that doesn't mean you should have any disdain for them. I think you should just embrace that and say, well, all right, I'm going to make this world a little bit of a better place then. And if I'm not like any of these people, then I got to be the one to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Number 10, you are headstrong.
Yes, I'm very stubborn.
Well, you're a Virgo, right?
Lord Jesus. Yeah. Virgo and an Indigo. Woo.
I've gotten so much better, though. I must say, I'm very proud of myself, because I've gotten a lot better at breathing through it and thinking, okay, this person doesn't have the capacity, or this person just doesn't know what they're doing, or just or I can see it from their point of view, The worst thing is when I can't see it, when I absolutely cannot see it from their point of view, no matter how hard I try. Like unnecessary unkindness, like people who are just mean just to make people. Now I can understand, like, maybe that person's hurt people. I can go through all of that in my head. But you can kind of tell when someone's just having a bad day and they're not thinking, versus someone who just is out to make everybody miserable. And that's like the one thing I still have a lot of problems with. I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it. I have to talk to those people. I have to just be like, stop, like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings us to number 11, which is you are passionate and focused. So I think that is again, for the course, that is the arena of being an indigo child, is that, it all comes down to that theme, I think, of there's a certain standard that you recognize, this potential within humanity that we obviously are usually not even coming close to meeting, even though we are fully capable of doing so. Same thing in Christianity. One of the struggles, I think for all priests, is to recognize just how easy it is to truly follow the command by Jesus to go and sin no more. And yet what do? We go and sin more. But it's really not that hard not to do that. What the challenge comes from, simply just being less and not living up to our full potential, and being okay with that, or not giving enough, care to prevent that from happening. And I think for people that are spiritually connected like you're going to see that, and anybody that works in that same kind of spiritual capacity, like a priest would, or a confessor. We see that all the time. I mean, of course, the work is to always be compassionate and to recognize that we are flawed and we will fail, and that's just what it happens. But at the same time, the frustration is still there.
Very often people, I'll say this before we move on, very often people, more often than not, they are operating no more than an ape.
Autopilot. It's primate autopilot.
This much more, maybe just this much more, and that's something. It's like, all right, these people are animals, and they're not going to do anything else. It's
like Doctor Who. I don't know if you watched like the Doctor Who, but there was a wonderful with the not David Tennant. It was Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. Something Rose does pisses him off, and he's like, "I've done it again. I've picked another stupid ape."
Yeah, I've said that to myself so many times.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
Yeah. Yep. Number 12 is you have psychic abilities. We've already kind of covered that one. And then number 13, the last one, is you are frustrated. So I think we've covered that one too.
Yeah.
So those are the signs of indigo children. If you know children from the 70s and 80s, that in 90s also, that have some of these characteristics, then maybe they're an indigo child, at least according to that standard. What does it mean, though, and what are those ramifications? We're about to get into that in this next segment here, but before we do so, let's go ahead and say hello to Father Christopher Yates, who you need to look out for now, because he's now a moderator in that chat room. So if you cause trouble, he might throw the hammer down on you.
I only discovered this when I logged in today, so I don't know what to do with all this power. I might go crazy.
I know, because all is a lack of power. I mean, you're stuck there in Australia with the bars and the rubber bullets.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, at least finally people are kind of kicking against the pricks, to use a biblical term. So yeah, there's some hope. Unfortunately in New South Wales, not Victoria, where most of those riots are going on.
Yeah.
And the reason it's not been so aggravated here is that for our Premier is doing her best to open things up. more so than any other premier. That's the equivalent of a governor, I guess. Where you are. And we do just to confuse things, we do have governors here as well. But like all heads of state in the Westminster system, the governors have no power. So just like the Queen doesn't exercise power. And you know what happens when you have a head of state that's elected and does have power. So I'll leave it to the audience to decide which is best. So anyway, but we're kind of getting on with things. We now have the wonderful privilege of being able to meet up with vaccinated people for a picnic, up to 5 people.
Oh wow! So, don't go crazy.
Yeah, I know. So I might lose my mind with
Geez, actual human contact. Wow.
My goodness.
Because of course I've been abiding by all of the restrictions the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And moving on. So the things are good. I've been enjoying this segment. It's interesting that the sense of kind of liberty, which as you know, there is a reason we get on. This sense of liberty as being sort of underpinning all of these things is so powerful. And I think as we've experienced here in Australia in these recent days, the notion that the flawed notion that somehow it's okay to centralize power as long as it's the right person. Yeah, you see, this is the great myth. The myth that actually was exploded by Thomas Jefferson. I wish Americans would read Americans more often.
But they don't care. They don't care about it.
I know, it's amazing. We had slaves. We can't listen to a thing he said. Really? You'll never have the right person, and if you had the right person, they'd become tyrannical too. So you'd be doing the no favors. But I was kind of I was intrigued, Michael, by or something fired me off about. There's lots of people in the world who can be taken advantage of, and there's no shortage of people ready to take advantage of them. In lockdown, I've had I don't know how many text messages and emails from people trying to exploit me. They're barking up the wrong tree, but that's because I'm a cynical ex-copper, you know. But actually, I want to affirm I said it in the chat. Actually, we need softer hearts. Even those of us who are smart enough to see through, we also need people that can protect and guard against people being exploited, obviously. But even we, those of us who've had those roles, we still need soft hearts. Being hard-hearted is not a virtue, you know.
No, it's certainly not.
Wisdom and nous and what have you. You can't let them harden your heart. And it's so easy to allow to happen. So I don't want to discourage you, Michael, from being open to people. My goodness, we need more of that in the world, not less.
Thank you. That means a lot.
But it's having the right people in the right place, isn't it? You know, and that's why we have. We have this great fundamental truth that we're created in the image of God. And actually, if we look at the variety of human beings and how we interact with the world, and that we see, in fact, just how amazing God is, because we all are reflecting the image of God. Yes. But diversity has become a word that I hate, actually, but not because it's not a good principle, but because it's been abused. Yes. But the whole purpose of diversity is to say that there are diverse ways of being in any given time and place, and that actually that diversity is a good thing. What we've done is we've made diversity into actually homogeneous thought, but we've got to have the right sex, color, whatever. That's the only thing that's diverse. Everything can be diverse apart from thought. And so right. I think so you fired me off on that great appreciation that God creates us in his image. Yes. And that because God is greater than any one of us or even all of us together, it's not like we create God creates us. That diverse experience of the world and of one another is actually not just a nice thing or something to be valued, but something at the heart of reflecting who God is. So I think it's quite profound.
And one thing that's really helped me in the same that's very related to that is, I think God is infinite, and if you want to take it a bit more esoterically, God is an infinite concept, and for something to be truly infinite, you have to have every single, from the moment life started, from the time all life dies out in the universe, you have to have every single experience, and each of us are expressions of that. So that's kind of helped me be a little more tolerant of people who just, it's like they have to be, for God to be, they have to be, plain and simple.
That's right.
And that is the challenge. I mean, the ego doesn't like that because, from our ego vantage point, we see we develop the things that we develop disdain for certain behaviors or certain patterns of behavior or points of view. And of course, like we talked about, we sort of alluded to quickly about the 16 personality types. Psychology has sort of identified them. Esoterically, they are contained within the court cards of the tarot as part of a mystical system that has existed long before the tarot was ever developed. But it's these 16 aspects of human behavior or human nature really truly do make up the gamut, the full thing. But the reality is each one of those is wired according to a particular principle. So half of them are going to be wired to one, and the other half are going to be wired to another, which creates the illusion of duality, the true polarity of our existence. But that's where the left and the right come from. And so you have what it should be in its pure form is that the progressive aspects of this are what move things forward so that they don't become stale and stagnant. And the more conservative aspects, or what we would label as, I guess, the right wing, the progressive liberal side, or the one that pushes for change, is that the left, and then the right is the conservative that sort of moves more slowly, retains tradition, holds fast to tradition. That keeps things from moving out of control and spiraling into oblivion. These two forces work together. They're not supposed to be at odds. They are necessary to each other. Unfortunately, when you lock these principles, these universal principles, into human beings, and then have them filtered through an ego reality,
right.
then what you get are the tensions that we now see, and they're not really true tensions. They're fabrications.
Isn't the problem, though, that they're actually, or the presenting problem at the moment, and particularly in America, and therefore the Anglosphere kind of always seems to follow, is that actually they're not in tension. That actually it's good when they're in tension. I mean, there's lots of archetypes for this. I've spoken in the past about St. Peter and St. Paul in the church.
Yeah.
There's a similar kind of thrust there. But the problem is that they're not in tension. The problem is that they're separated. Yes. And actually what we want is for them to be in tension. It's a good thing. That's why the two, the right and the left, have to dialogue, because actually the goodness for everybody else is somewhere in the middle. I think
it depends on how you look at it, because I mean in the way that it means about what you mean by intention. If they're working as they should, which is to create resistance to the other, then that's the pure form. That's what should be happening. Unfortunately, to use your analogy, it's more like a rubber band that's being pulled in two different directions. Eventually, it's just going to snap. That's a different type of tension, and the one to which I'm talking about. And that's, I think, where we are. The result is things do fall apart. It really is a rubber band. And I really think that our reality is truly that fragile. And the only reason why we're still here is the grace of God. I'm convinced of it. I don't think there's any chance that this civilization would continue to exist on its own merits.
So there must be something still here, and that's the hope I hold on to. There must be something still here that's worth holding on to, that's worth keeping around.
Well, I always say,
I think it's more about promise, isn't it? I mean, God has made a promise. And God's intention is that God didn't create the heavens and the earth, the whole universe, capriciously. You know, he didn't think, oh, wake up this morning and think, oh, I'd quite like to have a different view.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Doesn't work like that.
Out of the window.
Yeah.
You know, it's that there's something by design, something of God's love and essence and being in the world, and of course for Christians that was affirmed and fulfilled by God entering into creation, becoming, you know, the creator becomes the created. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that somehow God is a distant observer thinking, well, I mean, a bit like that story, you know, oh, if I find 10 good people, will you save the city? You know, oh, you know, if I find 9,
yeah,
it's not like that. You know, we've got that archetype in the Old Testament, and therefore we know that's been dealt with. Actually, it's more the sense that the heavens and the earth exist because God wills it. And so we don't need to guess whether God can find some goodness in that order. He's created it good. He saw that it was good, and the totality of it was very good. And so, we can at least have confidence that we're part of something good, no matter how difficult it is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think what I meant more was like, it's hard for other people to see that. It's really hard for other people to see that.
They get blinded by all the manipulation and the ego. So
it's sin. I mean, we really, sin is what makes sense of the world. I mean,
right.
It's not very popular. No one wants to talk about it. But you know, part of the problem of more utopian visions, you know, the visions of the anointed, as Thomas Sowell would call them, is that it doesn't account for human frailty and sin. And so it's not that we should over focus on. I mean, I'm a priest wearing a black shirt and a white collar talking about sin. It's a bit of a cliche, but I'm not saying it in the wagging the finger way. Yeah. You know, it's actually to say there's a sort of affirmation of accepting the fallen nature of humanity. Not that we get left there in a puddle. I mean, Bishop Bryan, you gave a great aside when you said, you know, that you're wanting to walk alongside people into salvation. Mm-hmm. You know, that's right. Absolutely right. You know, and so does Christ, of course. But it's not a descent just to sit next to you, you know, and say, oh, let's suck together. You know, it's and that's why, you know, sin can be spoken of, even though sin is, of course, an offense against God and something which is to be overcome. The concept of sin is something that actually can be a spur of hope, you know, and that's why the Holy Spirit convicts us of our sin. It's never the devil that does that. It's the Holy Spirit, because as soon as you're aware of something, actually there's an impetus to deal with it, you know, and that's godlike. It's a refinement process, I think. It's because we're dealing in linear time, which God is not, and so
he's outside of linear time.
The decision's been made, but it's like I've made the decision to make this amazing sword, but I have to put it in the fire, hammer it. So yeah, I think it'd be a great topic of a show about the end times, and
we're going to do that with the eschatology. Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that. That show's coming up towards Advent, and we'll discuss perhaps a little bit about what the end times really means, and how we should look at it in both a sophisticated Christian point of view, and not so much the way that I think people tend to trivialize it down to being like, oh, well, this has got to be the tribulation coming or something. But to that effect, Michael, you know, as we already sort of seen, even though I think I like that article that we read in the 13 characteristics of Indigo Children. Mm-hmm. I liked it because it kind of was the best one that I found that gave a realistic impression as to what it is, because it didn't sort of sugarcoat it. And I've noticed that a lot of ones sugarcoat it. It's like, oh, look at these wonderful spiritually enlightened children. They're here to save us. They're here
rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah. And I mean, and as you know, it is a very dark reality to enter into, because the first thing I try to explain this to people when they're encountering a demonic attachment, because it's very similar. Okay. If you've never done any mystical work, and if you've never had any spiritual experiences, typically speaking, unless it is God reaching out to you deliberately, which does happen and can happen, and usually it happens through angels. Sometimes it's a direct experience, but that's a little more rare, but not unheard of. But if you're the one that's doing the work and reaching out and you don't know what you're doing, okay, and Indigo Children this is going to be natural for them, and no one's going to know how to guide them, and they don't even know how to guide themselves, and they're going to be thrown into this haphazard experience, and without any kind of foundation or guidance. It doesn't typically bode well, because what ends up happening is, as soon as you punch a hole into that spiritual world, well, the first thing you're going to encounter is going to be that lower vibratory environment, which is what we classify in Christian terms as the demonic. And so the demonic is the closest thing to the density of the earth. When it's very, the metaphor of the fall of man, okay, the fall, original sin, and all this stuff, is actually quite literal in that sense, that it was a true fall in vibration, to the point that now we have entered into this state of entropic density. Everything is it's so dense that it can't maintain cohesion for long. And that's what, sort of creates the notion of death. But not just... You could even get scientific with that. Sorry to interrupt. But... No, you could. You could, because, the science actually backs this up if you're looking at it. And that's why I use the word entropy, because it is so, it's so perfectly related to what we're discussing. But that density of the fallen universe is where we see this corporeality as we understand it. It's not true corporeality in the perfect sense, not like the resurrected body, but in the fallen sense, in this very high density sense, which puts it in a very fragile position, which is why we don't live very long when you think about it. 70, 80 years might seem like a long time, but when you're talking about a universe of billions and billions of years, you're 70. Like
less and less the older I get.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. It's not very long, and we're very fragile. When you think about it, we're very fragile creatures. It doesn't take much to kill us. It doesn't take much for us to just dissipate into nothing. And so, with that in mind, now the first non-corporeal thing you're going to encounter is the closest thing to that fall, which is the demonic. Naturally, they fell too, right? The fallen angels. Again, that same analogy, that same metaphor, there's a sort of like ancient scientific corollary that I think they were trying to use. That it wasn't just to consider this thing where, because think about it from the ancient Jewish worldview. Okay, they didn't see the world as we understand the world. They saw it as basically, kind of like a flat earth, a flat plane with a dome over it. And the heavens were above this layer of water between the dome that held the firmament in place, and that there were these doors that when God opened the doors, water would fall out. That's the rain. Okay. And so that's kind of the ancient cosmology that the Jewish people had, the ancient Israelites had. And so their mindset would have been that, when the angels fell, they literally, those doors were open. They were thrown down to this lower density, this earth plane that we exist on. But there's also something that's vibrationally accurate about that. So as an indigo child, okay, somebody that's operating at a higher vibratory rate, because that's how I would classify it metaphysically. There's not really a good correlation for this in Christianity. You might just say they're maybe, there just isn't.
Or maybe the mystics. Yeah.
The mystics, maybe. Yeah, you could say the mystics would be the closest thing. In Buddhism, they have the Tukalas, and that's a real good correlation. But they see it more in terms of masters that reincarnate, and so they go looking for their reincarnated master. So let's say there's a person, a lama, for example, that attains to a very high position of realization, and his body's growing old and it's ready to die. Then he leaves behind clues right before his death as to where he's going to be found again in his new body as a new child, as a new child, and they go looking for that child, and then they bring things from his possessions to the child so that the child can identify what objects those were, and then they know they've found the right person, and then they're taken back to the monastery so that the training process, the teaching can continue on. That's what happened with the Dalai Lama. Right. And there's a wonderful exploration of this in the movie Kundun. If you ever have never seen that movie, it's a wonderful movie, and it really shows you what Tibetan Buddhism, how it works culturally, and the life of the Dalai Lama, and how he was found, and how that works. And that's
there's also an episode of King of the Hill like that.
Is there really?
Yeah, Bobby was the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't. I've not seen that show, so I don't know. I can't testify to it. But let's get out of the unicorns and rainbows for a minute, and let's just realize that. Let's think of the reality of it. Here's this person of high spiritual sophistication, connected in the mystical sense, like Father Chris said, with the Christian corollary. And now you're here in this fallen world with no guidance, and you didn't have the benefit of growing up in the church. And I'm not sure the church would have been able to do a hell of a lot to help you in this regard, unless you found a mystical priest, somebody a priest that was already, because I remember when I went to nuns and told them some of the experiences I was having, basically their answer was start ignoring that and just get back to, go to mass and don't pay attention to it. When if the angels are talking to you, just ignore them. I mean, I'm not kidding. That's what they told me. And nothing felt right about that.
It shouldn't have.
No, it shouldn't.
Well, it does also explain the generational death of the church.
True.
The things that give meaning in the church were discouraged. That it's just descended into some humanist Erastian nightmare, and so. Sorry.
Elegant way to put it.
I
like that. That's going to go into my Twitter profile if you're not careful.
Yeah, but I mean, you just think, so, I mean, especially, I came out of the Anglicans, and entered Catholicism, but you think, a synod, you're just a pseudo government, and we've already got enough of those dickheads. You don't need any more. Sorry, excuse me. But it's like, why would you want to recreate this stuff? Everyone hates it.
Yeah.
It's just like if you want to destroy the spirit, there's one way of doing it. A very, very quick and effective way, and that's why there's no one left. He wants to come and join some stupid council of a group that nobody would, you wouldn't know. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to stop.
But it's right.
We got you.
I mean, you are so right, and that's that's part of that antiquated thinking that I think a lot of people recognize, and they sort of generalize to the rest of the church, and they don't realize that there's a lot of us, people like you and me, who are here to resist that and to not let that overcome the.
But how can it happen? Like, we believe amazing things. We believe absolutely amazing, mystical, metaphysical things.
Yeah.
We believe the body and blood of God incarnate is made present on our altar.
Only 30% now, Father.
I know, and it shows. Doesn't it just show?
It does.
Doesn't it show?
Yeah.
And so I think, how has it happened? How has this happened? Like, people just lose their wonder, and it's a little bit like I was describing. Police officers can end up cynical to the point of destruction that destroys their relationships. So. They can't trust anybody, and I think with the clergy, I knew a bishop who I quite respected. There aren't many of those. And he
isn't that the truth?
And he did say to us once, one of the only useful things I was ever taught really in seminary education. He said, we get very used to handling holy things, and never get used to it.
Oh my God, that's so true.
And that is so true. That is a profound truth in that. And I think the kind of cynicism that policemen get from dealing with people, well, priests get the cynicism of dealing with the sacred, and actually begin to treat it like it's profane, and to speak about it like it's just another political thing, rather than an amazing, life-changing, eternally saving truth.
That is so incredibly powerfully true. I mean, I can say that I've experienced that in my as a struggle along the way, the little dark nights of the soul that creep up in one's priesthood. And I always made a very strong effort. And sometimes you might even notice, and some of those members out there, or audience members right now who do watch the live mass, might notice certain times where Sister Mary Joan, I'm sure, knows what I'm talking about, when there's a moment at the altar where I'll pause, I'll stop, and the flow is broken, and I have to almost catch myself and bring myself back. And it's because I give myself room to lose myself in the miracle of each one of those moments that I have every time I have the privilege of going up to the altar to celebrate another mass. I can't let it be relegated to just another day at work, even though it's very easy for our brains to get into that type of thinking and that type of routine. I have to always remind myself what it is that I'm actually doing here. And when I'm quite successful at that, maybe because it is the mystical inclinations in me that make it a little bit easier. But then I lose myself, and there's a lot of left brain parts of the mass where you have to, keep form and, make sure that you're
especially for the celebrant, because there's manual actions. There's there's secret prayers, not secret in the not secret in the Gnostic sense. Yeah. Secret means in the low voice. Just prayers that we pray. Yeah. And I agree with you. I always feel like it's a tightrope. Because it's a good thing to be aware of that spiritual. I mean, obviously, without it, you're dead. Yeah. But actually, you also have to keep it together enough for the sake of everybody else at the mass. So it's a bit of a tightrope.
It is. It would be nice to have a concelebrate a few times. I mean, it'd be great to just be able to defer for a moment and just have my little.
It's good to have a private mass for that reason too.
Yes, it does. Yes.
A private mass is a space where you can
kind of take it slower.
Do that. Yeah, and particularly if you do it in Latin, not because the Latin mass is magic, but there's a sense of using a language that's not so readily available to you.
Exactly.
There's something that,
definitely true. We are talking about Indigo Children and some other interesting facts about the spiritual life. And we're going to be going on for another hour. So stick around. We'll take your questions coming up here. Call into the show or just ask us a question in the chat room on YouTube. Sister Mary Joan and Father Chris will be looking at them, and you can ask a real Indigo child what her life is like. Don't go away.
Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it
Welcome back, everyone, for the third and final segment of Vestiges After Dark. We're talking with Mikal Van Oene about her experiences as an identified Indigo child, and we're taking your calls and questions on this next segment here. So please give us a call, 347-338-1860. That's 347-338-1860. PIN number 1100999 gets you into the switchboard. You can also ask in the chat room on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. Our moderators are looking for your questions, and they will post them on YouTube so that Sister Mary Joan and Father Chris can see them. And maybe I might too, but I got all these other things going on, so who the hell knows what I'll see. Anyway, don't go away. We've got another hour, and we love to hear from you. So let's see what happens. Well, I don't know if you all watch the screen during the break on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, but during the break, we have a little slideshow that comes up there. And I don't know if you noticed, Michael, but I had a picture of us at Epcot Center on that boat. Yeah.
I think I still have that picture, too.
It's a great picture. And it's definitely during the peak of all of those crazy experiences. That you were sharing with me back then, as well as some of the adventures that we would go on in the paranormal.
Yes.
we were kind of like, we were ghost hunting all the way back before the shows.
Yeah, I wanted to so badly.
Yeah. Didn't we? When do we think your that there was like a ghost in that bathroom or something?
I think it was a bedroom.
Yeah,
we had the camera facing the bathroom.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
And I was trying to stand up and look through to see if we could catch anything. We didn't.
We didn't. No, there was no EVPs or anything.
It was
right?
Fun. Yeah, it was so fun.
it was a really wild time. But if you're wondering what that picture is of me on the boat with Michael, that's what that's all about. There, we're at Epcot Center having a good day. Okay, so Sister Mary Joan, Father Chris, has any questions come up in the chats?
I've got one that's a good one for Michael, from Mary Rose, I believe. I had to write it down because it scrolled off and couldn't go back and find it. She asked, as an indigo, what do you feel is most important to preserve on this planet? Bam!
That's a pretty good question.
No pressure.
I gotta think about
that one.
No pressure.
Most important to preserve. Well, that's kind of. I mean, it's kind of like it could go anywhere. Like it's kind of vague. Like for how long? For infinity? For an infinite? Until we become
maybe let's just go with currently. What do you think we should strive towards currently in this generation?
I see. Okay. I kind of get out of my head, so I think.
See, that's a mark of that's an indigo child right there. See, she's not thinking, she's not on that low level there. What she's doing, she's thinking about entropy, and it's like, well, nothing lasts. So what are we going to be able to do about that?
Exactly. But right now, I think millennials are having children. Millennials being, I'm a millennial, I'm 31. My generation's having. I know. My generation.
Not all millennials are crazy. Yeah, not all.
No, actually, I mean, I know a lot of very good people, but a lot of millennials are having children. So my age group's having children, and without going into too much and not taking too long, I think somewhere along the lines we lost our way. We forgot how to teach emotional maturity. We forgot how to teach empathy, and that you don't have to agree with someone to get along with them.
Yeah, personal responsibility, critical thinking.
Yes, something happened, and I have my theories. I think it was standardized testing, and also the invention of the smartphones. But anyway, could be wrong. But
they're not that smart.
Yeah. Yeah, they're taking away our brains for us. But I think that it's really important to teach your children how to be kind. And I think out of anything, I mean, you don't have to be intelligent. You don't have to be a talent. You don't have to have an amazing talent. If you're kind, I'd rather be around 1,000 dumb, kind people than one really smart shithead. And I'll take the kind people any day, even if they've got nothing that I could relate to or talk about. I'd rather have people.
You don't have to be extremely intelligent to smile at someone or give them a wink.
Shitheads are the most dangerous people in the world.
Yes, agreed. You don't.
The dumb ones are fine.
Yeah.
Yes, right, because they don't get very far.
Yeah.
But I think you can make, with one smile or one kind gesture or one selfless act, you could make a person's day. And not only that person will be inspired to share that with other people. And
yeah, you never know how far it's going to go.
It stretches beyond anything we could probably comprehend, and I think that is very important too.
Well, I want to also call attention to that last thing you said about, that you don't need to agree with everything to get along. And,
right.
That is definitely a lesson that I do not see. I remember back when Trump was running for presidency, and, there were people, actually, we're talking about the first time. Okay. There were people that said, if you vote for Donald Trump, our relationship, it's over. Families
were
would,
falling apart.
yes. And I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay. That's taking this to a
deplorable thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's unbelievable, really.
Cha-ching.
I
And it's like,
can't imagine that.
how can you let yourself become so controlled by the system that you would ever put your family, your relationships below your ideology, or this ideology that you've adopted? Because who knows why? Why do you think you need it so badly? Why is it so important? See, this is what I love to do with conservatives and liberals. That, all they do is talk about these things. And when you go to their Twitter feed, all it is, liberal this, liberal, or conservative, conservative. It's hate in whichever direction they want to spew it, with the opposite side. Okay. And what I do when I ever encounter people like this, which is actually, interestingly enough, very rare and real in the real world. It's only on social media where it seems to be so prominent. But it's like, I want to say, why would you think that this ideology is so important that it now controls everything you do, to the relationships you allow yourself to have, to long-standing familial connections you're just going to break off because the ideology says so? And they do not see.
It's ludicrous.
It is. They don't see the fundamental problem with this. But this is exactly what's going on in the world.
Love is a bit like free speech, isn't it? It only really matters when you don't agree.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter any other time.
Yeah.
It doesn't take, imagine, obviously, because I'm a priest, people can't write their own wedding vows. But can you imagine if you did? I'll always stroke your hair in the morning, and I'll like it when you bring me a cup of tea. Yeah, they're the things that are easy.
Fair
you don't need love for that.
No.
You need love for the difficult things.
Love is for the hard times. Yeah.
Those are friends of convenience, fair weather friends, and I've met a lot of those people, and you can really tell. I mean, you really tell who really loves you. You really start to realize when you start having debates with somebody, and I've actually met a few people. I'm a very middle of the road person with problem with being middle of the road. It's all
everyone
sides.
hates you.
They think you're the other.
Yeah, there's no middle road anymore. So
you got no friends.
No, right.
Yeah.
And they even make fun of it. The online is called, they're an enlightened centrist. But so they're making fun of people like that. So not only are people like that bullied, but it's like it's just brushed off, and so they're another. They don't matter. And
they call them enlightened centrists. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I think that's the term.
Well, then we're just going to call them unenlightened extremists.
Yeah, right. I know, and it's like they think people think you're better than everyone else. I notice that a lot. Just because I have a lot of knowledge on certain subjects, I have a lot of passion. People don't believe what I've done it with in my life. I've studied herpetology. I've played at Carnegie Hall. I could go on and on, and it sounds like bragging, but it really boils down to like I could sort of maneuver my way around to experience something.
You've actually done some things in your life. You've had a good life experience. Well, there's a lot of people out there now. Well, their idea of a life experience is, oh, hey, I gained 2 followers yesterday. Let's see if I can get 10 today. That's not living.
If people don't do anything, they're never criticized. But the flip side is they don't do anything.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's like, if you're being criticized, it's because you've done something,
Yeah.
But actually, you said something important earlier on, Michael, that that you try to be someone that brings some goodness to someone's day, or, to be a blessing. I think one way to inculcate that in yourself, and again, I mean, I'm a sinner among sinners, and so I fail to do this a lot, but is actually to think about my own life and think, gosh, how many people and specific people, look back and think, gosh, that person was patient with me. Gosh, that person, or this person really helped me out when I had bugger all else going on, or when things were chaotic, this person brought some peace and calm, or when I was too assured in one way of thinking, this person brought the kind of tempest that would help stir me up. And I think I don't do that enough in life. And I think that's something that really we should be doing at least once a week, just to recollect and give thanks for those people, because it does encourage us to try and be like that.
When I had my motorcycle accident, I had my core group of friends show up at the hospital, and they stood vigil, helped my parents come in from Illinois, who, one of them had never even flown, and people came out of the woodwork. People that I knew professionally, but I wouldn't consider a friend. I would call them a colleague. And some of them turned out to be the people I leaned on the most. Yes. So yeah, you just never know. And, when you ask, why are you doing this all for me? And it's like, you're my friend. And it makes you reflect on, wow, I guess you are my friend. You just simple niceties can go so deep. And we've forgotten how to do that.
And words of appreciation, I think.
Right. Just a simple, hey, you look great today, or I love your smile, nice eyes, something, just something nice. We're not allowed to even compliment each other anymore, because me too.
People freak out, yeah.
No, let people be kind to each other.
Gratitude is really important. I mean, and it is the antidote to cynicism.
Right.
Yeah, but also to be grateful to God. I mean, people are very quick. It's very easy to kind of, people talk about the problem of what's the word I'm looking for? Of suffering. How can there be a benevolent God if there's suffering in the world? People, if you spend any time thinking about the problem of goodness, that would go out of your mind. Yeah, actually, the problem is goodness. I mean, Darwinian evolution tells us why things are crap and why people suffer and survival of the fittest. It can't explain why people storm the beaches on D-Day. The problem of goodness is actually a far bigger problem for atheists than the problem of suffering is for Christians. But actually, if we focused more on gratitude, what is it that God gives us? That is the antidote to cynicism. I don't do it enough. That's why I'm so bloody cynical. But I'm trying to narrate myself around it.
I think you need to give yourself a pass during this time, Father. I mean, honestly, during the COVID-19 and what you're particularly dealing with. I mean, we joke about it, but I mean, it's serious. Down in Australia, I think you need to give yourself a pass. It's a very cynical time.
Well, and also I don't want to, like, being political now rather than spiritual, I don't want to give gratitude for people that believe they can dole out freedom to me.
Yes.
I don't want to give that absolutely fundamentally wrong philosophy that says somehow government is the possession of another human being.
Right.
Because it's not. And so, please interrupt me, Michael.
I want to, because you said something about being grateful towards God, and that's been, sometimes it's really hard to remember if you've had a long day and it's like, I just want to go to sleep. But then I've kind of gotten into this routine where I go through, as I'm going through my day, I'm directly kind of trying to make a connection with God and saying, this is how I'll do better. This is what I'm grateful for. Well, I'm finding I'm realizing that a lot of prayers are very selfish, and I think that's why that's like people say, "Oh, God didn't answer my prayers." Well, what were your prayers?
Yeah, did you pray for anybody else? Yeah,
they're very self-centered. And it's like, I want to get this promotion, or God, give me this. It's not like, give me the strength to get through this time where I don't have a job, or please allow me your strength, or please allow me your wisdom or your or just your humbleness to get through.
Or how about just having enough trust to say,
Yes.
"Thy will be done." I mean,
yes.
people pray the Our Father all the time, but they don't really mean those words when they say, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." They don't really want to mean that because their egos are just like, no, I don't want to give up that much control. I don't want to have that much faith. I don't want to have that much trust.
And also that God does answer all prayers. But people don't entertain the idea that sometimes the answer is no.
Right. They don't. People don't know that. People think they need something. They don't know that. I mean, sometimes the thing that you think you need isn't what you need at all. It's something completely different. And
it's what you want, which is a different thing.
Right. Yes. And I have a prayer that I really love. And I don't know if it's the St. Peter's prayer or I always forget.
Which one is it?
It's the one that. Oh, it's not the St. Peter's. It's like give me the.
It's the Serenity Prayer.
No, it's the one where don't allow me to not need. It's like it goes through a list of things where, please let me give hope where there is none and not ask for.
Oh, St. Francis prayer.
The St. Francis prayer, yeah.
Can I read it? Because it's beautiful.
Go ahead.
This is what I always go to. I think of this prayer and I don't ever remember the names. It's just horrible.
See, the grace of baptism does miraculous things, doesn't it, Michael?
Yes. So I think of this prayer all the time and I think this is put beautifully. So Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, and where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. That where there are shadows, I may bring light. That where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. So.
It sounds like the complete antithesis to politics, doesn't it?
Isn't it interesting, though?
It sounds like St. Francis was an Indigo child.
I think he might have been.
But here's something really to throw a spanner in the works of what you just said, Bishop Bryan, although a good spanner. When they were the words spoken as Mrs. Thatcher entered Downing Street. So when she was elected Prime Minister, she was asked for a comment, and all she said was the prayer of St. Francis.
Yeah. See,
Nice.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. And I mean, I'm hard on politicians. There are some good ones. And I actually did like a lot of the things that she did. I mean, I would say that she was one of the most powerful women to have ever lived.
That was a different era back then.
Yeah.
She was principled. She was a Methodist, by the way.
Really?
But I call her Our Lady of Grantham. So
yeah, no, she was a good one.
That's my devotion to her.
Yeah, no, I can understand why, because I mean, there's some good ones out there, and some of them do understand that politics is a call to service. Unfortunately, they turn it into service of themselves, and they use their power to manipulate themselves into greater positions of power and wealth. And that's what I
the quick fix, by the way, again, is to listen to that Mr. Jefferson that they should be part-time. Shouldn't be a full-time job.
No, I don't. I mean, I think everything that is wrong with politics is the fact that you can be a career politician. There's no question about that.
Well, and get paid to do it. I mean, George Washington
was never meant to be a career when the founding fathers put all this together. It was never meant to be a career.
Lawyers, and I apologize to any lawyers out there who might be listening to this, but I mean, lawyers, and I'm going to be very frank, have fucked up this world in so many ways. And every politician, in some form or fashion, started out in that capacity.
So many have law degrees, don't they? It's quite astounding.
They do. And they tend to be the worst ones because they understand manipulation. I mean, to be a successful lawyer, you have to understand manipulation, and you have to have no reservations about using it. So it doesn't surprise me that politics has gone that direction of corruption, because I mean, the very legal field itself, which is supposed to be about justice, is all about really just basically loopholes and manipulation of those loopholes in order to bargains to get the
making
advantage.
bargains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
So to go back to Michael's original answer,
yeah.
Everybody be nicer to each other.
Yeah, there you go. Are there any?
There are some other questions if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead, Father Chris. You see one? Go ahead.
Rose had another one, and then there's a long one.
So yeah, I've got one here that's basically it's a question that I'm often asked, which is from is it Vera? I think
Vera. Yeah.
Yeah, that says she fully understands and believes what we're saying, but how can she get her godchild and her son on board? And this is the question: how do you pass on the faith?
You can present it, but
I think
also, can you present it if it's your child and your godchild? Are you the best person to do it? I think this is the whole idea of the community of faith. That just like raising children in general, it's very difficult for kids to listen to their parents because their parents are their parents.
Right.
And so, a lot of this, I think Steve Biddulph speaks about this. He's raising boys. He wrote a book called Raising Boys, and he talks about you need to have really good friends of yours because they can tell your kids. Like they can have their friendship with your child, and when they're giving them advice, it's not their dad giving them advice. It's not their mum giving them advice, but it's someone you trust who's giving good advice because it's somehow easier to listen to. And so I think one of the pieces of advice I would give is, do you trust somebody within your and their world? It can be the clergy. I mean, that's why clergy abuse has been so terrible, because they used to be the best people for that, and it was abused, But is there somebody else who can communicate that in a way that perhaps might be easier for them to listen to?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that bothers me, which is kind of, I guess, a little bit away from that question, but it's in the same ballpark, is I do hear people often say, I don't want to get my baby baptized because I don't want to choose their religion for them. I want them to choose their religion. And they make it seem like it's some kind of admirable thing to think that way. But I think it is the obligation of every, at least in terms of the Christian. I mean, I'll talk to the Christian world because that's the one that, is the most relevant to me. I think it's our obligation as Christians to set a firm foundation. But I don't think it needs to be any more than that, but not any less either. I think there has to be the foundation, and I think there has to be the experience of that foundation. So, it's not about indoctrinating. It's not about coercion. It's not about picking their religion for them. It's about setting them up so that they themselves can one day aspire to a relationship with God, whatever that might mean for them. And that could be different than it is for you. But what is important is to have those foundational experiences. I never, you might think that, I'm sitting here religiously indoctrinating Levi. I don't. I almost never talk about religion unless he wants to talk about religion. If he comes to me with a question, I answer it, and I answer it truthfully, and I don't sugarcoat it. I don't talk in, childish terms. I give him the same answer I'd give any of you. I am very blunt, and I am very frank, and I tell it like it is. And I've always been like that. Even when he was very small, I was like that. And
one of the problems, Bishop, is that people have used euphemistic language to explain the faith to children.
Yeah.
But actually, that's then become the adult, and there's no more than that. Like all they know is this kind of, not neutered, but gentrified version of the gospel. I remember once, it was Passion Sunday, and it was a church that really didn't understand the church, which I know sounds crazy, but I was a deacon, and we were going to read the Passion narrative, and the incumbent said, "Oh, I think it's all a bit too bloody for a kind of gathering, because this was a gathering at someone's house and a barbecue afterwards. It was basically a social occasion, and the actual truth of the crucifixion was a little bit inconvenient and a bit too, bloody for the gathering." And I thought, what are we doing? This is madness.
God.
And so anyway, under obedience, I did restrict the amount of gospel passage I read, but I was also preaching. And so I preached the most blood curdling sermon you've ever heard, because but that's what I'm saying though, is that people have got used to this, the coloring in Jesus, meek and mild, and that's what they pass on. And they wonder why it doesn't stick, because I'm not saying, by the way, I should clarify that. I'm not saying that's what the person that's asked us the question is suggesting. I don't think that for a second. No. But I have seen it, that children go and colour at the back of the church, and then in 15 years' time they go, oh, where are they?
Right, they're gone.
They've never actually been given the faith. And I agree, not indoctrination, not about whipping people with dogmas, but actually the very visceral truth of the life of Jesus.
Michael,
and the death of Jesus.
Along those lines, I mean, how old were you when I baptized you? So you would have been what, 28, 27?
What, 3 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, so 28, I think. Yeah.
So you were about the age I was when I met you, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, but what as a young person, I mean, 28-year-old,
yes.
Most people are not looking to get baptized at that age. So what inspired you to seek this as an initiation? I mean, outside of maybe anything that I might have talked about in class or whatever, but what were your spiritual internal motivations? And if you don't mind sharing your relationship with God and how that might have encouraged you to move in that direction, because I find it interesting. Sure. You didn't have that. I mean, you didn't have that upbringing, and I mean, I didn't really push it very hard. I mean, I didn't push it at all. I mean, I was actually quite not really surprised, but I was a little bit surprised, I guess, when you mentioned that you wanted this, because it just wasn't something that I thought would have been a direction your life would have gone. So I'm curious.
Me neither.
Yeah. So what was it?
Let me take a minute to think here. So like I said, at one point in my life, I considered myself an atheist. It just never felt correct, because I always knew there was something beyond this, because I felt it so deeply. And so that's, you say, like, you mentioned the first things you encounter when you break that hole, or when you break through that veil, is the demonic. And I, for about maybe like a year or two before I contacted you, everything I created, I don't know what happened exactly, but see, I have a very scientific mind. I just want to put that up. I mean, that's just something that comes to me naturally. I always want to know why, and I always observe, and I always sit and observe. And that's the funny thing, is I truly believe science and religion can coexist, as we were saying.
Yes.
They do.
They're supposed to.
Yes, they're supposed
they are supposed to. Now science has gone way off into...
Yeah,
somewhere.
It is.
Science is not a belief; it's a process.
No, that exactly.
Well, they're making it a belief.
I know. Oh, I know. That's the problem.
Trust the science, Father. Trust the science.
These atheists.
I am the science.
These atheists, I swear, they are just as dogmatic as any evangelical Christian I've ever met.
They are.
If not more so. They are mean and nasty, and if you don't believe what they believe, they will beat you down, like, verbally. And so,
you know what it is? They're scared. They're scared that you might be right.
Yes, they are.
Let's just cut to the chase. Well, they're deep inside. They're scared.
People don't like their realities broken and shattered, and see, I think that's something that luckily have in my favor is that I love when things go crazy. I embrace it. I love when things when everything that I believed is just completely proven wrong, and I'm ready for it. Like I'm ready for aliens. Like I'm a skeptic that they would. I believe in aliens. I believe they're out there. I'm a skeptic that they would come to Earth, or even if they could, that they'd have any sort of interest in us. But I'm ready to be proven wrong.
I think the only way that, and I agree with you, by the way, but I think the only way that they would have interest in us is if they had something to do with our genetic makeup.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
or if they could eat us.
Well, that's possible, but
if a society is so advanced that it could reach thousands of light years to get to us, I highly doubt that they would have had to work together. So they already got teamwork. They're experts at it. So they're not coming to take over. They're already over that period of their existence. So anyway,
did you see the Twilight Zone To Serve Man, Mikal? Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have.
Do you remember that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
For those who might not be familiar with it, there's basically, these aliens make contact and they come down and there's this book it's To Serve Man, and so they think they're here to help us when in reality it's a cookbook for how to eat us.
That's a good one. Anyway, I for a time thought. And it was only because I was exposed to mainstream evangelical extremist Christians, Southern Baptists, because I was in Florida. I was growing up in Florida. That's all I was exposed to. So hate. And a lot of my friends were in the LGBT community. They're mostly, I have a lot of friends who are gay or bisexual. And it was all hatred directed towards them. And that's all I was exposed to. So this notion of like accepting this God that others have pigeonholed to make it they basically pick and choose to make it. They're making this belief system for themselves that it's like, this is what God said, and here's all the little pieces I picked out without any sort of context. And so it says exactly this thing, and that's why we should hate you, and that's why you're sinners. It's like we're all sinners, but it's like sinning to them is like, you're a sinner, just be thrown away. It's not like
Protestants are defined by protest. I mean, I'm not saying this to offend anybody. I mean, I actually came to faith in the Baptist Church. I've said that before, so I'm not saying it to discount the witness of Protestantism, because actually, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have converted at that time. So, but it is kind of defined by being against something. You couldn't have had the Protestant church without Catholicism.
Right.
It had to object to Catholicism. And actually part of the existential crisis of Protestantism is that because so much of the Catholic ethos has shifted in that direction, certainly Second Vatican Council, what have you. I'm not really making a theological point because it's far more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
But because the Zeitgeist of it has actually, it ceased to be a thing that can be argued against, really, other than perhaps the jurisdiction of the Pope. That's about it, And so they've had to find others, and that's been, homosexuality. It's been, the sort of purple issues that divide, and but it's not so straightforward. I mean, they're not entirely wrong, by the way. But
it's misdirected.
They take it into they take it and use it for their own agendas.
Well, they forget that the Bible is not the Quran, in the sense that the Quran is believed by Muslims to be a verbatim account of God's word.
Yeah.
God's word to a Christian is very different. They're a collection of faith accounts, individual experiences with God. And that's a different
parables and
yes, it doesn't mitigate their importance, and it doesn't detract from the value, but it must be understood in that context. We are not Muslims in that sense. We do not believe in a verbatim copy. We believe that there's room for expression and room for understanding, and that things are applicable to the various times and ways in which they were presented. And I'm the first one to tell you, I love St. Paul. I love St. Paul. But I can guarantee you, he was not writing those letters to all those churches thinking that this was going to become a collection of dogma.
In fact, if he was, it wouldn't have happened.
No, absolutely.
He wouldn't be very happy about it.
He couldn't have designed it.
No.
He couldn't have designed it.
Yeah.
No.
That's actually what makes it divine.
I guess so. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
So Brian, that's funny because this is where I was going. So when I contacted you, you were talking to me about a bunch of different things, and it was hitting me one by one. It was like puzzle pieces just clicking into place.
Me? No, I don't do that.
but you had me read the Gospels, and you said, "Tell me what you think," and you said, "Just read them, and tell me what you think." So I read them, and some were horribly boring, and some were really great. And I loved the writing, but I got through them, and each and every one, and I read, and I came to you, and I said, Bryan, it's about your individual. All Jesus wanted was for you to work on your individual relationship with God.
Yeah, that's it.
No one else can tell you what that is.
No.
But that's all. He was doing away with all those weird rules and those weird, like, little weird things that were actually, a lot of them were political, and a lot of them were because people didn't know how to, like, conserve food or behave. And it's like you start to realize that. And then it's like when Jesus was everything that he did was, all he was saying was that it's your personal relationship with God that you are developing in your lifetime.
Well, that's why. And to go back to the question, one of the things I would encourage you to do with godchildren, or people around you, if you want them to explore the faith, and picking up what you said, Bishop Bryan, that Christians do not view the Bible like it's the Quran, is to get a copy of the Bible that is yours. And as you read, I always say, read the Gospel of Mark first, because it's the shortest, but it also leaves a lot of gaps. Okay. And so the gaps are where it's at. So, but I say, and get a pen and write questions when you think of them at the point in the text that you thought of it, or observations or whatever, underline bits but underlining is limited. Write a question, write what's going on in your mind, a reflection, a thought, write it in the book. Because then when you come back, if you're going to come back to a priest or to somebody else that is guiding you through this, if you're the godparent, then you can see what's firing off and the thoughts in that person. And hopefully if it should be somebody that's equipped to be able to draw out some of the deeper meaning, some of the reasons for the resonance, some of the context of what's going on, with the humility of knowing we'll never know the full context because we didn't live there. And so, that is a really good piece of advice that is not mine. I've received it, is write in the book. It's not, the Bible is holy. The book is not. The sheets of paper are okay to write on.
Yeah.
If you will never, ever force somebody into doing something. And if you are just, it's like force feeding.
You shouldn't want to.
Foie gras. No, because some people just don't have the capacity, and that's okay, because they will at some point. Some iteration of them is going to gain capacity to realize this. But the person you don't want them. You don't want to force them, because that's how you get. I truly believe that this whole atheism movement, these dogmatic atheists,
rebellion.
I have very good friends who are atheists, and they're very fair, and we have discussions, and we don't get mad at each other, and they don't put me down. So it's very possible to create friendship and actually very intriguing discussion with them. But these dogmatic atheists, it is rebellion against their parents. I think there was like a boomer thing, and I guess, no offense to you guys, but
we're Gen Xers. It's okay.
We're Gen X, yeah.
We're not that old, sweetie.
We're the good guys. We're the good guys.
Something went wrong, and it was like I think there's this force feeding of religion, and it became monotonous for the children. It wasn't fun. It should be a fun process of discovering and
it was actually an early form of identity politics. Because it was, the boomers had been told by their parents, we are Anglicans. We are Catholics.
Well, we've got
Baptists.
just a couple minutes left. So are there other questions that we could maybe answer in lightning speed? I don't want to miss any.
One from Aaron, and this is for Michael. Curious on your guys' thoughts. I don't know if I'd be an indigo child, but I've had experiences where I can feel energy, or I've even had this feeling of energy wings. It feels kind of celestial. Is that even a thing?
Yes. I'd say so. I've had friends I have actually multiple friends who've had dreams of me with giant wings and a sword. So, people who didn't even know each other and have that same dream. I definitely how I feel it actually. It stopped being wings and I started feeling it, like I said before, as a bunch of these tentacles of a bunch of different aspects coming down in through my body from this infinite space up above me, this swirling, churning infinite space. And the tentacles that I need to go in at the time I need them to go in, they just come in. And that's kind of how I describe it. It's this big feeling that goes up. So I could see how you could feel it as tentacles, this giant.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that all
wings,
of these incorporeal metaphysical experiences that we'll have in these mystical encounters are going to always play out in the psyche as an archetypal experience. So you're going to encounter things, anything that's like related to a celestial experience is going to have angelic overtones like that. That's kind of the way our brains interpret data that is beyond its comprehension. It will always do so through the language of archetypes. And that's why fundamentally I teach everything is archetypes. Everything else is an extension of that.
There's an artist, I forget his name real quick, is that he depicted angels, and the way he did it was even in the Bible, they were these angels were just incomprehensible churning things of
terrifying
eyeballs and terrifying,
right, with the wheels with the eyes and the
and that's how this person did it in fractals and mandalas, which is very similar to how I experience it. It's like a self-emanating fractal
energy waves that emanate out. I can understand that. Any other questions, sister?
There was another one from Rose. Real quick question from Facebook. Okay, Mary Rose, how do you feel about clairvoyance given your relationship to the Bible and Christ?
Are they asking me or?
Yeah, it doesn't specify.
They're asking Sister.
Thoughts on everyone.
They were asking you, Sister Mary Joan, but.
No, that was Danielle bringing me attention to it.
Okay, sorry.
Right.
Well, okay. So, how do I feel about clairvoyance and psychic ability as a Christian? I don't have any conflict with it because the way I see it as
we've established that there's no conflict with it.
I don't see a difference between psychic ability, empathic ability, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, all these other things that we can have as being any difference from the gifts of the Holy Spirit and the charismata. I think the difference is in how we define it. And if we think that we're drawing this from our own power, that's where the problem is. If we understand that these are gifts that God does grant to us, that there is more to us than just this corporeal form, and that these experiences can reveal these higher levels of realization, and we know that it is something that is coming directly from God. It's a gift from God. Then there is no conflict. I mean, we know that
even the most conservative Christian wouldn't think for a second about somebody saying, God placed it on my heart for me to call you today and ask how you are.
There are some evangelicals, I'm not trying to pick on them, but we've had how many clients, Bishop?
It's okay, you can pick on them.
And they were basically beat into submission by their church.
Yeah.
You can't feel that way. That's demonic.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably adds to a lot of the frustration.
It does.
But this we don't feel that way.
No, we don't. We might have time for one more quick question if there is one.
I did not see any new ones.
Okay, well, Then, Michael, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us for this 3 hours.
I'll come on anytime you want.
Oh, well, we'd love to have you back. Absolutely.
People are interested for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're great. And
thank you.
I mean, it's fun to be able to chat like this, and I hope that we can get together real soon in the real world, not online like this.
We're thinking of coming down around November, so I'll just get in touch with you.
Cool.
Depends.
Sweet.
But
Okay.
yeah, we'll see you guys.
Great deal.
And I'm hoping to be given yet another drip-fed freedom to leave the country in December.
Okay.
So you never know. I might be able to get
we'll
over
pray
there.
for you.
Definitely. Well, thank you, everyone. I do appreciate all your contributions to this show, Father Chris, Sister Mary Joan, and of course our special guest Michael, and all of you that make the show possible out there in the chat and call. When we get callers, I know we don't get a lot of people that are live listeners, so the callers are far and few between. But as the show grows, we're up to 800 subscribers on the YouTube channel, so that's fantastic. Keep getting the word out and get people coming to the live show, because our archive listeners are plentiful. It's the live that we need to grow. Anyway, next week we got Sean Austin talking about hauntings, so don't miss it. That's a week from tonight on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope to see you then. God bless, and I'll see you out there in the ether.